Live.
Okay, we are live. Joel, wonderful to
Vicky.
see you.
Yes.
We have, just before we connected, we were just saying there is so much to discuss. It's like every day a domino falls. Should we kick off with the State of the Union? I mean, if we kind of have to,
Absolutely.
right?
Let's do it. Let's
Okay,
do it.
all right. What did you think?
A couple of thoughts on this. First and foremost, um, the president spoke a ton about foreign policy. So I'll focus
Yeah.
on the foreign policy. I think the largest number of minutes in terms of a chunk, according to some bubble charts I've seen, was on national security, over 8 minutes. He spoke about Venezuela for about 5 minutes. He spoke about other international issues at several minutes more. I think affordability kind of came in there towards the end. Nothing on healthcare. By the way, the word China never popped out of his mouth, which is
No,
kind of
it did once.
troubling. Did it?
Fact check, Joel.
I missed
Because,
it.
I'll tell you, because he said Russia and Chinese technology was used to protect Maduro's compound.
And then he mocked it, which, is
So
fair.
he
Right?
got that in there and rolled his eyes. No, he got that. He got that in there.
A
And
dig
yes,
at China.
so
But yeah.
yeah, go on.
No, but I mean, look, the big takeaway is that we don't really know much more today than what we knew yesterday before the speech about where he wants to take us, in particular on Iran. And I think that's really troubling. That is when the president needs to make his speeches clear to the American people. Think about past speeches. George W. Bush, regardless of the substance, he talked about axis of evil, talked about Saddam Hussein, was very clear with the American people. Nobody was surprised about what he was trying to do. We didn't have anything to that effect. We had Barack Obama in the past talking about nuclear agreements and nuclear deal with Iran. Nothing last night. And so left me really wondering.
Except for the fact he said, I'm not prepared to let them have a nuclear weapon. Right.
Yes. Which is kind of similar to what every president has said, actually.
Right.
Nothing groundbreaking there. And in
fact,
and
also, he told us, the Operation Hammer, whatever, got rid of all their nuclear capabilities. So, there's a slight, either they did or they didn't. But
yeah, they're off message on that, aren't they?
Yes, so and Jared Kushner is going to Geneva tomorrow.
Yeah.
For talks on this. So what is your prognosis?
Well, so Witkoff went to AIPAC last night or yesterday, and the president spoke, State of the Union. Jared goes off to talk to the Iranians. The way I like to think about it is there are three different clocks sort of ticking, and they're not in sync with each other. You have the Iranian nuclear program clock, which frankly is alive and kicking. Maybe it's a bit of a zombie program, but it is not gone entirely.
No.
You have a clock of American politics, and Congress is talking about potentially trying to push for a war powers vote. Both chambers have had language introduced to try to get that, but they're not pushing it hard to the floor, but it likely will happen. Then you have the real world clock, which is we actually have a huge armada sitting outside of Iran, the largest military buildup since 2003, and you can't leave our troops there indefinitely. And so how long can they be there? And then the fourth clock, I should add also, is the Israeli clock, which is, as we know from the June war, the Israelis instigated the strikes that led us to follow on. And so I think that, the idea that somehow we're going to get the unicorn deal tomorrow that's going to have Iran fully agree to eradicate every single nugget of its nuclear infrastructure permanently and forever. I just don't see that as a realistic outcome. And so then what? And that's where the Iranians, I think, are kind of daring the president to say, okay, you want to talk tough? You want to do this? Let's see what happens. And so I fear that we are coming to an end of the negotiation process, but without necessarily a negotiated solution.
Right. Well, that's, I mean,
Sorry to be dark.
no, 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 it is dark, right? Because it's one thing to go in the middle of the night and pick
Yep,
out Maduro, and you have to. I mean, the State of the Union show to me felt like a game show. And now, come on
totally.
down. But I did think the story of Eric Slover, the officer, who had his legs shot on the helicopter. It was great storytelling. How,
Top of the line. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, um, but taking on Iran is very different from
it
putting
is.
Maduro out. And you could see also when Trump told the story, he loves telling these stories of the military, of heroism and bravery, because yes, you're right. We all forget about affordability for a second while we listen to what really happened. And so, you know, but it's also troubling that one worries that he just wants to flex the muscle because it's shades of the small boy with his toy, army or whatever.
Yeah, look, Vicky, I think he's backed himself into a corner on this. First of all, there was a clean win in Venezuela when we step back and look at it, and you just described it, right? What is the clean win in Iran? There isn't one. And so when I say he backed into this, remember how we got to this point at this moment, right? It wasn't as if we were sending in massive troops to negotiate a deal. He threatened the Iranian regime because they were massacring their people. And
Mm.
and I have to say this: the Iranian regime is horrific, a terrorist state, despotic. They killed tens of thousands of their own civilians within days, machine gunning them to death in hospitals. The stories are beyond savage. And the internet was shut down, so much of it was repressed. And so Trump said, "Don't you do it?" But then he started sending ships there, and so there's like a mismatch. Was that to knock out the regime, which is killing some people, or is that to now use as leverage for the nuclear program? And so the policies kind of in a lot of different directions, which
Right.
then leads to lack of clarity about how to achieve specific objectives. And if the objective is to get rid of the nuclear program, sue for peace or whatnot, I'm all down with that and I'm fine with that. But I don't think that we have positioned ourselves in a way that is going to clearly get to that success point. One other thing I have to add is we're doing it alone. And there's a bit of a paradox here. We are not negotiating alongside our P5+1 partners like we did a decade ago for the Obama nuclear deal. We are alone with the Iranians through an intermediary like the Omanis. And in a way, that's a win for Iran because that
Mm.
now has Iran equal to the United States essentially at the table, something they never have gotten
Yeah,
up
because
until
that's right.
now.
The Brits have refused to let the Americans use their Air Force base, right?
That is part of it, and the Brits are not
Yeah.
sitting. And also, when I say the P5+1, I mean basically the UN Permanent
Yeah.
Five Security Council members. We had Russia and China, the Brits and the French, alongside the United States and the European Union, negotiating as a powerful collective with Iran.
Yeah.
That is no longer the case. Now it's just the US and Iran. In a way, we've made it our own party, which puts us in a very weird political position as well. And, if we cut a deal with Iran, the president's not talked about this, but he's going to have to. It means massive sanctions relief on Iran while he's talking about stop killing your people. So I don't know if he realizes exactly what he's setting himself up for.
And where in all of this do you think Israel is?
Yeah. And look, across the board in Israel, there's legitimately deep contempt for Iran, distrust of the Iranian clerics, the leaders, hatred of what Iran has done by supporting proxies that have attacked Israel. And so you don't really see much daylight. Benjamin Netanyahu is on terra firma politically when he talks about being tough on Iran. But what the difference is in the sort of how reckless or not to be regarding Iran. But with Donald Trump in the White House, across the board in Israel, there's a sense that he does have the Israelis back from a military perspective on Iran. Of course, President Biden did too, when he provided anti-ballistic missile defenses and THAAD systems and Patriot batteries and whatnot, and shot down missiles that were coming at Iran in April of 2024. But I think, frankly, Israel at this moment, unlike in June, they're waiting and watching. One last thing on this: on the nuclear program in June, the Iranians were advancing it. They were moving quickly. The IAEA said they were. That's not the case right now. So it's a little confused because it's kind of like we're putting military forces out there to address a different issue, and now
Right.
coming up with a new reason for having them there. And so that makes me nervous because that leads to stumbling decision making and mistakes.
And is Jared Kushner the right person to be in Geneva having talks tomorrow?
Goodness, look, there was a line, I think, that Steve Witkoff said, and sort of when I say Kushner, I say Witkoff, Kushner interchangeably
Yeah.
because they're a real partnership, right? And Witkoff, I think it was on Fox. It was an interview the other day where he said the president is confused as to why Iran is not capitulating. And all I could think was, I talked to some friends about it, it's like, boy, if they had kept some Iran experts around, they might not be so confused. I mean, Iran fought a war against Iraq in the 80s, lost 500,000 people, and it didn't capitulate. I'm not saying that I don't want them to capitulate. It's just that is not really part of their lexicon
Right.
from a governance perspective. And so, like, putting a bunch of ships around and threatening them militarily is not really doing the business. So I don't know if they really are the right people for this, because I don't know if they're really coming at it with all the depth of expertise that
Right.
one needs to get a negotiated outcome. Because here's the point, Vicky. If the goal is elimination of the entirety of the Iranian nuclear enterprise down to every last morsel and nugget, and it's gone, if they can get that, I will be the first one to applaud them. But they probably won't get that out of the Iranians. And so then the question is, what are they willing to have technically to live with? And can they live with that and sell that to the Israelis and others that it's a failsafe when it's still this horrible regime running the program?
Right. Well, moving on, but speaking of Israel,
No answers, just critiques
no,
right now.
no, we wait to see. Breaking news coming out of Israel, though, saying US will offer embassy services in a West Bank settlement for the first time.
Yeah.
Obviously Hamas saying not okay. That you're not supposed to legitimize the settlements. What's your take on this? Why are they doing it?
This is the effect of this is that there are thousands of American citizens in Israel, dual nationals. A significant chunk live in the West Bank settlements, have moved there for either economic or ideological reasons. And so that territory up till now has been treated as an occupied territory, meaning that U.S. government will not provide official activities in there in any meaningful way to sort of make a more permanent status for that area. By doing this, it's just one more additional step of showing that the United States essentially recognizes those settlements as Israel. While it's not annexation in the law, it basically is an annexation position being taken, or one where the United States would say that's okay if you annex it. The challenge here is that if there's ever to be a negotiated outcome, if there ever between the Israelis and the Palestinians that requires some territorial exchange and compromise, the areas that we're referring to are clearly not going to go back to the Palestinians, right? Like that's what this says.
Right.
This says that settlement block, Efrat, others, that is staying with Israel. And it's for the Palestinians, they just continue to have less and less territory to negotiate for.
Yeah.
And I think this administration has made it pretty clear that it views that territory as essentially part of Israel. The big question now is, what about the Arab countries that have peace with the Israelis, the UAE in particular. Are they going to raise alarms? Are they going to protest? The Palestinians obviously are going to protest, but what
Yeah.
about the other countries as well? And I think this is a major step.
Really interested. We haven't heard from MBS as well, the Saudi Arabia, in a while. So I'd be curious to get his take.
That's going south fast. That Israeli Saudi rapprochement, big time.
Fascinating.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, look,
Fascinating.
if I could just add, MBS and the Saudis, after October 7th, prior to October 7th, they were really talking about being close. I don't know if they were or not, but at least that was the
Yeah.
mood music. President Trump wants that part of the Abraham Accords to get the Saudis and the Israelis
Yeah.
together. But in recent months, MBS has basically said, no way whatsoever. I support the ceasefire and all, but until Israel moves on a policy towards a long-term peace settlement, I'm out in terms of normalization, and that's not a great position for us to have to deal with, and for the Israelis to be staring at. And it's caused a lot of strain inside of Israel politically. Different from Iran, there is a lot of critique about Prime Minister Netanyahu not being able to figure out how to keep the Saudis and move them in the right direction.
Right. Well, and then speaking of sort of territory that then wants to be, where territories people want to negotiate over them, but maybe it's too late. Russia, Ukraine. I noticed
Is that
Trump.
still a thing? Sorry.
Well, notice he didn't say anything about supporting Ukraine,
No, no.
even though apparently I read somewhere that Republicans were wearing Ukraine pins as well as Democrats. Some of them were. But he just said, as usual, I want to end it. Okay, but I mean, you know, where are
Look,
we realistically?
Vicky, I mean, this is not an erroneous miss. This is not like, oh, whoops, they forgot to include Ukraine in that speech. Secretary Rubio at the Munich Security Summit about week and a half ago or so, barely talked about Russia and Ukraine, and that was in Europe to Europeans. He really just didn't mention it. They don't want to talk about it. It's a blemish on Trump. He said he would resolve this war within 24 hours. His favorite talking point after that is, it wouldn't have invaded if I was president. It's Biden's fault, right? So blame Biden. You're a commander in chief. Everyone respects you. You've stopped 8 wars, but this one is Biden's fault. That's just you know, completely convoluted, and to be diplomatic. And so, look, I think on Ukraine, the Europeans, the decoupling of America and Europe as allies is occurring. We're watching it. It does not mean we're going to go to war, but it means that they don't depend on us. They don't rely on us. They don't think that we're really going to be there for them. And that means they have to figure out what to do with Ukraine. So they're providing much of the military supply. And you can see it in Zelensky. He's kind of depressed in the way he's talking about this now. He's essentially saying, we hope that President Trump will do something on Putin. We support whatever Trump says. And it never happens. And I guess, Putin has an unending, a bottomless pit of ability to allow for Russians to die, right?
Yep.
1.2 million Russians in 4 years, and he doesn't seem in any hurry. And for President Trump, he's tired of it and doesn't see a pathway out unless he puts pressure on Putin, and he's not doing it. He's just not doing it. And for the Europeans, they are, I think, realizing that they are truly on their own on this policy, and it is moving in that direction. And and for the American people, like, basically the least popular figure in America is Vladimir Putin. Like, in poll
Mhm.
after poll, he scores at like 2%. And so I think it's a real um, moral failure of our country at this stage, because I'll say this is our country, this is the government we
Yeah.
have. And it is the kind of thing where we are not putting any diplomatic energy into fixing. We're sort of sending our envoy out and hoping that we can get something, but very low level energy and very little pressure on the actual antagonist in this war, who started this war and doesn't want to end it.
Well, so just going back to Rubio for a second,
Yeah.
what did you think of his speech in Munich? What did you make of it?
I have mixed feelings about it. I thought it was, first of all, I thought it was a really good speech in a lot of ways. I thought he spoke in a way that was engaging the audience while we're separating at the same time. I thought that he spoke to some of our values and our history in a way that was meaningful. But I also feel that what he is essentially saying is that we in the United States are going to pick our friends and our partners based upon ethnic, religious connectivity rather than national state connectivity. And that's sort of like taking us back to why we got into all the massive wars that we got into before the United Nations and before leading into World Wars One and Two. We don't need to go back to that. And I'll tell you, Vicky, I'll prove you. I have a book coming out that I'm working on. Hopefully, within a couple of months, I'll get it out about foreign policy. But one of my big fears that I try to communicate in the book is that, like, we take it for granted this period of relative global peace, even though there are clearly conflicts around. It was never like this before World War II, and the motivator for much of the global conflict was ethnic hatred and sort of racist governance and lack of democracy. And I feel like those values, which really are central to the American experience and current identity, they seem to just be taken for granted, if not dismissed, and by the administration. And that speech didn't do anything to talk about those shared values. Talked about very particular values, and I just found that to be a kind of rhetoric that puts us in very dangerous positions.
Well, what do you think? I mean, we talked a lot about Marco Rubio last time and, the weight on his shoulders and, juggling, trying to thread the needle in Venezuela, um, which he seems to have done. I mean, I'm sure he will be, he'll try along with JD Vance to get, run for president in
Hmm.
2028. And meanwhile, so that speech was for Trump as well as for Europe, right? I mean, do we really know what
Audience of
Marco
one.
Rubio, thinks, um, given where he's from, given what he presumably feels about communism? I mean, I wonder. What do you think of how he has done in Venezuela? I mean, obviously, Trump was so gung ho, the State of the Union. You'd think that Delcy Rodriguez and he went, to high school together. Um, so, so
It's making
yeah,
all these Venezuelan stomachs
yeah,
turn. I'm telling you.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I feel like with Rubio that he's figured out how to play the role of strategic guide without being a strategic obstacle, right? So like, okay, this is what the boss wants, but we're gonna do it in the right way. And I will give him props on the Venezuela management post conflict because it has been structured and there are problems in like the Qatari bank, and now they're straightening it out. Okay, good. Uh, uh, who comes next? Delcy Rodriguez. Okay, my hope is they'll then push to get elections, that they'll then open up the system, right? Like there's a process in that he is managing, and I will give him props on that. He's dealt a very rough hand, but he is doing that. And so, I hate to do the analogy like my children because I don't want to compare senior officials to children, but I think about like kids and like how they're brought up, and maybe in their teen years they kind of stray a little, and then they come right back to how they're brought up. Like the roots, the foundation of the tree is what is most important, and he has a strong foundation. Um, so I have a little bit of glimmer of hope there. He's not a chameleon. He's not JD Vance, whose stripes change all the time. There's JD Vance was anti-war. Now he's pro-war. I mean, Rubio is talking about Iran in harsh ways. He's not getting ahead of the president. So I give him some props on this. He is communicating well. I don't like what he did with USAID. I think that what we've done is undermined our power and moral authority around the world, let alone
You've frozen.
overseeing the. Sorry?
Oh, you froze for a second,
Oh,
Joel.
no, no, no.
So
Sorry.
wait,
I apologize for
will
that.
you just repeat what you said? You think you didn't like what he did with USAID? You think
Yeah.
he's undermined?
Yeah, no, we undermine our moral authority, our power,
Yeah,
our soft power, and thousands of people have unnecessarily died, and that
yeah,
will just continue and continue and continue. You can't rebuild that, like, in a
no,
day. You can't get that credibility back, and it's horribly destructive. But he did that, right? And he supported that, and he didn't stand up against that, probably to his own personal benefit and to maintain himself in that role, for the long run. But it certainly is bad for the United States overall. I don't think there's any real clarity on how we're doing foreign assistance. But I will say overall, I'll just close with this one on Rubio and his management of these situations in Venezuela and in the speech at Munich, he is trying to figure out a way to keep the ship floating
mm.
while the captain seems intent on running it into an iceberg.
I love that. Very good, very good analogy. So, I mean, probably, I think my reader.
Oh my God, what is happening here? Well, I just got a note from a friend. It says carried the show. Thank you, sir. Where is my friend Vicky? This is her Substack, although I'm in on it too. I am going to try to see if Vicky is going to come back in. Um, and this is really wonderful to have everybody tuning in like this. We've got a large audience. Thank you all for being here. And let me see if Vicky is coming in because it does not look like she is, unfortunately. So, look, guys, I'll close with this, and then let me just. I'm sorry for sticking my finger in your uh, on the screen, but here it is. Um, well, look, from where I sit on what's going to happen over the next few days, I think, and Purim is coming up over the weekend, and we'll have Purim on Monday night. For those who know what Purim is, Jewish holiday where essentially the Persian Empire, the king was duped into almost killing all of the Jews in Persia, and then the king was essentially talked out of it by Queen Esther, who was Jewish, and Haman, who was the man who wanted to have all the Jews killed, one of the evil figures in Jewish history, along with Hitler. He was hung. And we love to celebrate that and celebrate that victory. And so it's a very auspicious date and a date of Jewish survival. And it's just fascinating that it's happening at the same time that we're having an Iran talk of an Iran military action against Iran into Persia. And the question is, what happened before or after Purim? My bet is it could happen before Purim. But I'll just say one thing about that. When I served at the State Department, during the Iraq War. I was there as a civil servant at the beginning of the war. And we spent about 5 or 6 months moving military infrastructure to the region from around the world. And it was intense. And I see a WhatsApp call, says I vanished. Hmm. Well, my friends,